Okay, welcome back everyone to the last day of our summer, August 2025 Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council meeting. We are going to step right into this morning's agenda. We only have a half day on the agenda today. The first thing we're going to do, and I know that it's been, there's been a lot of anxious anticipation for this throughout the week, and I want to applaud our new and reappointed council members for their patience throughout the week, sitting and listening and not having the full ability to participate as you may have wanted to. But in about 10 minutes, that's all behind you, and things will be different for the next 3 years. So I'm going to turn things over to Mike Pentney for the swearing in of new and reelected council members. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, usually we would be doing this to kick the meeting off on the first day, but we're glad we're able to do it and kick things off on the last day at least. So when we all leave here, everybody's a fully sworn in council member. So if I can ask, I'm going to stand up in a second. If I can ask Lisa and Jake, Scott, and Todd to stand with me. And I think you can all leave your mics off so this doesn't get echoey, but you've all hopefully got the oath in front of you. And if you can just read along with me so that we're all sworn in. So I, state your name. As a duly appointed member of a regional fishery management council, established under the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act, hereby promise to conserve and manage the living marine resources of the United States of America by carrying out the business of the council for the greatest overall benefit of the nation. I recognize my responsibility to serve as a knowledgeable and experienced trustee of the nation's marine fisheries resources, being careful to balance competing private or regional interests, and always aware and protective of the public interest in those resources. I commit myself to uphold the provisions, standards, and requirements of the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act and other applicable law, and shall conduct myself at all times according to the rules of conduct prescribed by the Secretary of Commerce. This oath is given freely and without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. Congratulations, you are now duly sworn in council members.
Congratulations to all of you. We'll make sure to get some good pictures for the families after we wrap up today. The next item on our agenda is the election of officers. I'm going to turn things over to Joe Grist, I believe, for this to announce the those that were nominated for chair and vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Outgoing Chair. And thank you for Chris for giving me the privilege of doing this. On Monday, August 11th, council members received an email noting that we had 3 nominations for chair and 3 nominations for vice chair. Those nominations as of that date were Joe Cimino, Scott Lennox, and Skip Feller for chairman. However, 2 of those 3, Mr. Lennox and Mr. Feller, have declined their nominations in writing as of this morning, August 14th, for chairman. Mr. Cimino, as the remaining nominee for chairperson, do you accept your nomination before we proceed?
Sorry, John. Yeah, thank you. And I know that, John, we have an open floor, right, for additional nominations, but yes, thank you.
All right. Mr. Almeida, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joe. And thanks, Joe. So at this point, I'll call for any additional nominations from voting council members for the position of council chair. Are there any additional nominations for the chair position? Give it a minute. Okay, not seeing any nominations, where we only have 1 nominated candidate by operation of the council rules of procedure on elections, Joe Cimino is hereby elected by acclamation. Congratulations, Joe.
Also on the 11th, we had at that time 3 nominations for vice chairman, Robert Rule, Skip Feller, and Michael Luisi. However, 2 of the 3, Mr. Rule and Mr. Luisi have declined their nominations in writing as of this morning, August 14th. Mr. Feller, as the remaining nominee for vice chair, do you accept the nomination before we proceed?
Yes.
Hearing that, Mr. Almeida, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, so in addition to the nomination of Mr. Feller, do any voting council members wish to present additional nominees for the position of vice chair? Any additional nominations for the vice chair position? Okay, hearing none, I now declare nominations for the position of vice chair closed, and where we only have one nominated candidate by operation of council rules on elections, Skip Feller is hereby elected by acclamation. Congratulations, Skip.
Okay, congratulations to both Joe and Skip. Look forward to working with you guys in your new capacity. Before I turn things over to our business session and to Joe, I just want to say that I want to thank all of the past council members, current council members who have supported 10 years of me being part of the leadership group here. I've been a vice chair for 3 and a chair for 7, and it's been an amazing experience. I look forward to working with Joe and Skip, and I'm not going anywhere. People keep asking me, are you going somewhere? No, I'll be here. I'll be back in October. I'll just be on the side of the table. So thank you to all of you. It's been a tremendous experience, and I look forward to the continued work that we're all doing. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to help lead us through this. And Skip, congratulations. Very excited to be working with you and with this amazing staff. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, as to changing of the guard, Jim, I'm sure not everyone heard you, but when Spud handed over the chairmanship of the commission to me, and I know it was just completely like ad-libbed. He had a little box of Fruit Loops that he handed to me to say, "This is what you're getting yourself into." So now that's the commission. So I'm not saying that the council is quite in that state, but thank you, everyone, and Chris. I guess we'll get into our next agenda items. I think that's you, right? Right. So I know better than to call him Dr. Rago, but Paul, if you're online, I apologize. I guess you are next on the agenda.
Okay. Congratulations, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you and look forward to that adventure. So I'm going to be reporting on our July 22nd to 24th meeting. The items related to that are under tabs 11 and 12. Next slide, please. Now, I know you're newly elected, Mr. Chair, but you're not going to believe this. I have received a lot of requests for me to repeat the presentations I made earlier this week on ilex, bluefish, summer flounder, scup, black sea bass, and the white paper ABCs. But I figured you have suffered enough, and so I will forego that opportunity, and we can proceed with other business items. So what I'd like to do is to take a moment to solicit kind of an overview of the presentations and solicit some feedback on the SSC reports and the presentations. Presently, they constitute about 14% of the briefing book. These documents serve a dual purpose. One is to have a faithful record of the discussions, the evidence, the findings, and all the pieces that went into the decision making. We try to be as transparent as possible, and there are no things that are done outside of plenary. So these will be useful for future SSCs and so forth. But the other piece of that is to communicate to the council so that you can make decisions more effectively. So one of the ways that we've attempted to help streamline this thing is we've added the executive summary, which allows a rather rapid evaluation of the key findings for each species. I've tried to limit it to 5 or 6 slides to highlight the key points so that we don't have too much verbiage there, and just to hit the main points. And then the next slide, please. One of the things added in these sets of presentations was one just to say, what is the effect of the OFL-CV and how is it influenced by measures of status and the council's risk policy? So if that kind of graphic is helpful, as kind of a snapshot of the decision making, then I thought that may be useful. The other one is to sort of present the rubric or sometimes called a scorecard with respect to the various factors associated with the assessment model and how they enter into sort of the different aspects of uncertainty. So that includes the data, the model, the retrospective pattern, and then the empirical comparisons, ecosystem factors, and recruitment. So if that kind of thing is helpful. So if there are things that you find useful, please let me or Brandon or someone on the council, so we can, make these presentations more effective for council, council members and for your ultimate decisions that you make. It's probably a good time to give a shout out to the really extremely, helpful, competent, exceptional council staff that have helped. And for this particular set, I want to highlight the role that Jason, Jose, Hayden, Julia, and have played in terms of setting up the deliberations that led up to the SSC meetings and the meetings that followed it. So they are an exceptional group, and of course the overall guidance for the SSC is provided by Brandon, and that is again something that you all should be proud of in terms of the exceptional character and competence of these individuals. So the next item is that we are planning to do a meeting, face-to-face meeting with the center, and that could occur in May. Of course, all this is subject to budget constraints and priorities. So we will try to see how that might go. So that will be your decision later on in the year. And then our next meeting in September will be in Baltimore. So thank you very much. That's all I have to say. And next slide just as the follow up there. So if there are any questions, happy to answer anything you may have. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Paul. And I'll take my liberties as chair immediately and provide feedback before I ask for feedback from others. I think those graphics are extremely helpful. And although I appreciate you not re-reporting out on stuff because long days make a long week. I think repetition is very important to help all of us learn and understand this stuff. So understanding how the OFLs and the CVs and our risk policy play into our management decisions is something that I think we all need reminders on. I think you do an amazing job at that, as does Brandon and the other staff. So I personally love to see those graphs that you show, and I'll turn it over to the rest of the council. Are there any questions for Paul? I see Michelle. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And not a question for Paul, but just echoing what you said, with respect to the graphics that were included in the presentations, Paul, I also think those are extremely helpful. I mean, I definitely appreciate having the full report card, so to speak, with all of the bullet points that the SSC, so painstakingly puts together. But it's also nice to have that snapshot on the screen as, you're reviewing the final OFL CV determination and, highlighting the points that led to those scorings. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, Michelle. I got Chris Batsavage and then Jim Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, ditto to what Joe and Michelle said about the graphics that you used this week. That was great. Seeing these reports for quite a while now. I liked how that was presented. You highlighted the percentage of pages. I guess the reports are in the briefing book. I'm not worried about that. I think it's a good comprehensive write-up of these meetings, and the one that the SSC just had is one of the biggest ones you have all year, and that one in particular. And so that allows the council members and the public to take a deep dive into any of the subject agenda items that are of interest to them. But if they don't have time, the executive summary for the report is I think does a very good job of just hitting the high points and the take home messages, for people who, maybe don't have the time or to read everything. So I wouldn't change that part of it either at all. I wouldn't worry about how much it contributes to the overall briefing book. So thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Jim.
Thanks, Mr. New Chairman. And I'll add my voice to that. Paul, you do a great job at, simplifying a lot of the complicated things. So, keep up the good work. The only negative thing I'd say about the SSC, it's not really negative, as I said, I've never actually met Paul in person. And I know last year when we went through the training, I think that was one of the suggestions I had. It would be really nice if we had a little bit more FaceTime with the different folks that are involved with this whole thing, because, the SSC becomes somewhat of an enigma. I know some of the people on it, but, other than the ones that are local to me, I haven't met them. And now I understand that the training now is going to be video based or something along those lines. I think we're going in the wrong direction on that. So again, Paul, keep up the good work, and hopefully we can get more FaceTime with the SSC and some of the other support groups that we deal with so much. Thanks.
Yeah, that's it's funny, Jim. As soon as I sat down and realized that the SSC report was the first thing on the agenda item, that was the first thing I asked Chris, because the council has at times invited the SSC to council meetings. I think since the last time we've done it, the SSC has grown. It is a very large group. We have some folks that aren't even on the East Coast anymore. I think Olaf, who is fantastic and started off in New Jersey, is now in Wisconsin. But we certainly, I think, Chris and I were saying we should talk about that more and find out ways to make that kind of invite. And so we'll definitely look into that. I appreciate that. Any other questions or just comments on the presentation? Yeah, go ahead, Jim. Bye, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I just want to thank the SSC and Dr. Rago especially for the ability to take very high level and detailed information and then really, really scale it back and dumb it down so somebody that is not on the same intellectual playing field can absorb it and understand it. I know it's a bit of a stretch for them to dial things down to that particular level, but I do really appreciate that, because it is a lot easier for somebody that's not from that particular circle to be able to absorb and understand the information that they present. So my hat's off to you, sir.
Yeah, well, Paul, that's to you. So I don't know if you have any comments. I do agree. I think, seeing your presentations and Tom's as well, it is at the level where we could all understand it. I think in particular, you are able to think around corners, and that's always been extremely impressive to me and advanced our work in so many ways. So I also just want to thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, this wasn't intended to be kind of a self-serving kind of exercise, and but I do appreciate the kind words, and we can always get better at things, and so I'm going to always work towards that. I do think that the getting things across and making sure that they're understandable really is kind of the essence of what the SSC needs to do, in the sense that if no one understands it, then no one can use it, or use it properly. So hopefully we're approaching that objective. And then finally, I'll try to be less of a mystery man here in terms of my presence, and we'll work to perhaps get to a number of council meetings over the years. So appreciate that feedback. And if you have anything else that comes up along the way, please let me know, and I'll try to work that into not only the SSC meetings but also into the report itself. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you. I mean, I consider myself extremely fortunate that I have a relationship longstanding with many of the SSC members. So I think, Chris and I will reach out and try and figure out, the best way to kind of get council and SSC together. And I agree with Jim. I think that's an important thing. So not seeing any other hands. Nope. Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the NTAP report. Hannah?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations, and good morning, everyone. I just have a brief presentation to update the group on all things NTAP, which is the Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel. All right, so for NTAP, we've recently had some meetings. Last month, we had our full NTAP meeting. It was in person in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And then starting in August of last year, we started holding regularly scheduled meetings focused on the regional industry-based trawl survey. First focusing on the goals and objectives of this new potential survey, as well as planning for phase 1 of the pilot project. We took a little break, and then we picked those meetings back up following the July NTAP meeting. And the plan is for those future meetings to focus on phase 2 of the pilot project. Before I dive into some specifics related to those meetings, I wanted to highlight that we recently agreed to rename the previously referred to as industry-based survey with the acronym of IBS, which we decided was a little unfortunate. And we took that opportunity to rename it the Regional Industry-Based Trawl Survey, or RIBITS. And as you can see, I had a little fun with AI this morning coming up with this image. So first focusing on the most recent NTAP meeting that we had last month, we had a number of agenda items we discussed during this full day meeting, including our typical center and survey updates, recent news about the federal bottom trawl survey, and an update from the Moulton Task Force. The group also discussed the RIBITS, and got a series of presentations from some of the different surveys and scientific fishing that is happening in around wind farms to help inform our decisions and future discussions. For the sake of time, I'm not planning to dive into any details related to the Molten Task Force since this project is really New England focused and mostly related to cod. But if people are interested, there is a presentation online, or all of our meetings were recorded, so I could, of course, send that information to you. And then I also won't spend too much time focusing on the discussions of the survey and scientific fishing in and around wind farms. As I mentioned, we got a series of presentations. Those are all also available on the website. And it was really just to get information about some of the successes of fishing next to the, like around the cables and next to the turbines, how close they can get, and answering some questions to inform our regional industry-based trawl survey pilot project. So focusing on just these three, I'm just going to highlight some quick center updates since I imagine John Hare will have some of those as well, and then get into rivets. So the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, the spring bottom trawl survey was a success, and plans for the fall 2025 survey are on track, but staff at the meeting did note that there might be some concern with completing the survey if there's a government shutdown or any contract recompetes or end of year fiscal year issues, which I think is something that has been an experience in the past. The Gulf of Maine Longline survey was also a success, and 100% of those stations were completed. We also got an update on Pisces. Just as a reminder, the Pisces is the Bigelow sister ship, and the center is currently planning for the Pisces to fill in for the spring 2026 survey, while the Bigelow is unavailable given the extended dry dock. Center staff noted that that things are mostly on track, and there is still a little bit of question about if they're going to be able to get the contracts for the new wet lab that will be on that vessel and then eventually transported to the Bigelow. But they do have contingencies in place if that wet lab is not able to be added to the Pisces. And then center staff also highlighted the status of the offshore wind survey mitigation plan, and noted that they are currently drafting the final plans and cost estimates associated with that. And as a reminder, this includes the 19 federal surveys, both existing and some of the new survey concepts. And a draft plan was peer reviewed by a joint New England and Mid-Atlantic SSC group. And then during the meeting, we also got an update on NEMAP, the 2025 trawl surveys, all of which were successfully completed. Now getting into the NTAP working groups discussions. So these are related to rivets. During our regularly scheduled meetings, our discussions have been focused on several components, including those listed on the slide. And as a reminder, the working group has been working to develop a 3-phase pilot project to help inform what the long-term survey would look like. Our meetings since August of last year have primarily focused on the development of phase 1, which is really a proof of concept, which will include one vessel focused on operations and design. And then phase 2 would include more than one vessel, again, focusing on operations and assessing the full range of sampling protocols. And then phase 3 would start the year 1 of the long-term survey. The most recent news related to phase 1, the working group finalized the design, and it was presented to the full NTAP in July. If anyone is interested in seeing that full design, that is available in the briefing book. Additionally, the center was able to successfully secure funding for this phase of the pilot project. So big thanks to all of the Northeast Fisheries Science Center staff for really pulling that together. And it was announced yesterday that that meeting was transferred to the ASMSC, since they will be kind of managing the money and the project at this point. And the bid, or the request for proposals, was announced last night. This was shared with the working group in a late evening email. So this is kind of hot off the press. So if folks are interested in the RFP, it's available on the SMC website, and proposals are due September 5th. At the last NTAP working group meeting, we agreed that a small group of Northeast Fishery Science Center staff and a single NTAP working group member would review the proposals that are submitted and ultimately select the applicant. And if all things go according to plan, we're hoping to get phase 1 on the water late fall of this year, but we have a tentative plan for if that doesn't work out. So given that exciting news, as I mentioned on one of my initial slides, the working group has started up their regular scheduled meetings again, and these will focus on designing phase 2. We've really only talked about phase 2 on the surface level, so we will dive into those specifics in the next several months. At this point, no funding has been identified, but during our last several meetings, it has been noted that the center will continue to assess resources, and they will help out with any operations and plannings for this. And we also talked about the excitement of phase 1 getting on the water soon, because since that is the proof of concept, folks are hoping that that will be kind of the proof that we have to show folks that we can do this survey, and it's a good way to invest money. So we will see where that goes. Next steps, as I mentioned several times, the working group is continuing to meet regularly, and we will plan to meet next as a full NTAP probably in early 2026. And with that, I just want to give a big thanks to Catherine Ford and Anna Mercer, both leading NTAP, Catherine leading NTAP, and Anna Mercer really spearheading the working group in those discussions there. And then our co-chairs, Dan Salerno and Wes, who sadly will no longer be supporting NTAP at the co-chair level. But I guess that gives me a plug to say if anyone's interested in NTAP, that does go out with the committee positions. So we will have a Mid-Atlantic co-chair and a Mid-Atlantic seat on NTAP. So sometimes there's tasty treats.
Thank you, Hannah, and for also kudos for updating this slideshow at this very late hour. That was news to me on the RFP, and that's good news, obviously. I will forever feel guilty for, as chairman of the commission, always making an IBS joke on that. And I mean, it's just, anyhow, moving on. Are there any questions or comments? I do just want to say, as far as finding a replacement for Wes, we're not looking to do that today, but we will obviously tackle that in the near future. So that's not something that we have to jump into right now. Louise's already giving the don't look at me. Okay. But anyhow, any questions or comments on Hannah's report? Not seeing any. Great. Thank you so much. So now, Chris, I believe I can finally turn it over to you. Apologize for trying to jump to you so soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, congratulations to you and Skip. Congratulations to the new council members. Looking forward to working with all of you in your new positions. Also, before I get into my director's report, there's a couple other things that I'd like to mention. First, I want to thank Sunny for donating the seafood for the seafood hospitality yesterday. Thanks, Sunny. It was excellent. In fact, I had the seafood, that ceviche for breakfast this morning, leftover ceviche. It's pretty good. Excellent, actually. Also, I think Paul's still on the line. I want to thank him for his kind words regarding the staff. You know, they certainly really are excellent, and I'm glad that they work for us. So thanks for that, Paul. Another thing to talk about is money. We have received most of our administrative grant award for 2025, which is great. The amount we received was about 1% shy of what we were promised. So very close, but I expect that we'll receive that additional 1% by the end of the year. So we're going to be fully funded, which is excellent. Again, very, very good news. And we'll see about 2026, but I expect, at least based on what I can tell at this point, that we should expect level funding. You know, keeping my fingers crossed, being hopeful, but certainly that's my expectation. Hannah touched on this just now regarding committee membership. So folks that have been with the council for a while know that we typically, after the election, send out a request. You'll get that probably next week. Basically, the request will be indicate the top 6 committees that you want to be on, you know, rank order, and then I'll sit down with leadership, with Joe and Skip, and you know, we'll figure it out. So one of those things that we'll figure out is NTAP. So that's a really near-term need that we need to figure out. The other thing we need to figure out relatively quickly too is some of the liaison positions. So anyway, we'll get that done. So having said that, let's get to the items behind the tab. So I think, I don't know, Stephen or Mary, Mary's online, I think. Someone's helping me with the slides. So this is the first slide talking about our planned meeting topics for the year. It's a typical first item behind the tab. Our next meeting is going to be in Philly from October 7th to 9th. Given the agenda items that I'm looking at now, we're likely to start Tuesday morning with the executive committee meeting to consider that draft 2026 implementation plan that we've talked about a number of times. Also on the list for our October meeting will be approval of public hearing documents for that EFH amendment that Jessica has talked about, as well as framework meetings for tilefish and dogfish. So a relatively busy meeting. We have a number of other updates that you can see there on the list as well. One of the other things that we'll be doing at the October meeting will be the executive committee will meet to review nominations and select a recipient for the Rick C. Savage Award. So this is a change. Remember, we changed the schedule. So this is the first time that we're doing this. For folks that aren't aware, the award, the Rick C. Savage Award, is presented annually to an individual who has added value to the council process or made significant contributions to the management and conservation of fishery resources in the Mid-Atlantic region. So nominations can be made by any council member. The nominations, you'll get an email from me reminding you about these nominations. They'll be due to me by September 30th, so we can package them for the council meeting. There's also 2 other awards that we've talked about that the council gives. One is the Award of Excellence. The other one is the James E. Rule Cooperative Research Award. Unlike the Rick E. Savage Award, these awards are not given annually, but nominations can be received throughout the year. All the details for those particular awards can be found in the supplemental memo that Mary sent to me regarding awards, and includes an attachment with the details for folks that are interested. The final meeting for the year will be relatively late. So I've heard a little bit of grumbling about what, December 15th through 18th. So we had to do that to accommodate the schedule for the other councils. So, you know, unfortunately, it's a little bit later than we typically meet, but it's in a different location. Should be a cool location. It's going to be in DC. That meeting is also joint with the ASMSC board. So a big meeting. The next item beyond the tab is a document detailing our status of prior council actions. As I say, every meeting, it's a good reference document for council members to look at. List includes the rec sector separation amendment that we discussed this week, as well as the gear marking and dogfish frameworks that we've referenced earlier. Also, after that is an update on our submissions timeline for the prior actions that we've approved. Staff is working with Garfo staff to get the Circlime and Ocean Quag Amendment documents final. So hoping to get that happen, hoping to have that happen relatively quickly. Also, there's a table on the timeline and status of current upcoming specifications for our fisheries, if you're interested in looking at that. So I'm going to stop there, Mr. Chair, just see if there's any initial questions before I go on.
Yep, thank you, Chris. Any questions or comments? Nope, not seeing any.
You. So the next item behind the tab is a memo that you've started to see regularly, at least since we started doing IRA projects. It's a memo from Brandon and Kylie to us on the status of those 8 IRA projects that are approved and funded by NOAA. 7 of the contracts have been awarded. You can find the details in the memo regarding their status and progress. We'll start receiving final reports on those projects in 2026. Most have 2027 completion dates. The next item behind the tab is something that we asked Julia to do for us for every meeting, and this is an update of the offshore wind energy developments. So some of the items to note, you can take a look at the whole thing. I'm not going to read it to you, but just a couple of those that I want to highlight. BOEM rescinded all the WEAs or wind energy areas. Those are the large areas that were previously identified as potentially suitable for wind energy development. And those have been withdrawn. However, the withdrawal of those wind energy areas does not impact existing leases or existing wind projects. The Science Center provided council staff with a document detailing draft regional standards for wind project level monitoring. The center presented on that topic at our June meeting. They're asking for council input on that draft document. We'll share that document with the council after this meeting so folks can take a look at it, and then we'll provide comments to the Science Center if any are appropriate. Julia also included links in the document for more information on the fisheries compensation programs for the Empire Wind Project off New York and the Seabow Project off Virginia for folks that are interested. The other thing that's happening that's of interest to a lot of folks that we work with and our stakeholders is ongoing work regarding a regional fund administrator of that compensation fund that we've talked about. We may get a more detailed update at our October meeting, so stay tuned on that. There's also information on there, the Massachusetts Fisheries Innovation Fund and the projects that were selected through a recent round of ROSA funding. And finally, there's a long list of projects that are undergoing construction with links to more details if you're interested. So again, a really good job by Julia putting together all the wind energy information for us to keep track. The other thing that we started doing recently, actually after I hired Hayden, is that Hayden puts together a protected resources newsletter for us now to keep track of all those things related to protected resources in the Mid-Atlantic. We've talked about a little bit about this alternative gear marking framework at this meeting. Stakeholder input has and will continue to be collected by the councils, the PDT, FNAT, and other meetings prior to final action on that particular framework. Remember that we had this delay in the Atlantic large whale take reduction team process, but even with that delay, we expect that it's not going to delay the framework. The New England and Mid-Atlantic councils are expected to take final action on the alternative gear framework at their September and October council meetings. There's several meetings that Hayden details in her memo to us. You can take a look at those if you're interested. There's been an issue related to lobster that some of the folks associated with ASMC may know about, that I know what I'm talking about. So one of the things that Hayden makes a point of in her newsletters is this, that all stakeholders have had an opportunity to provide input and ask questions prior to taking final action. The GARFO staff presented to ASMSC's Lobster APA Management Board. GARFO and New England Council have also scheduled a public engagement session following an upcoming on-demand fishing gear conflict working group meeting on August 26th. The lobster, however, the ASMSC Lobster Management Board agreed to send a letter to the councils urging them to delay final action on the alternative gear marking framework, noting concerns about lack of outreach to the lobster industry. I know that I think that Toni Kearns is online, and if I could turn to her, Mr. Chair, just for a minute to see if she has any additional comments, I think that would be appropriate. So Toni, now's your chance.
Thank you, Chris. The American Lobster Board is going to be sending a letter both to both councils as well as to GARFO outlining our concerns about the lack of outreach to the lobster fishery to date on this action. It wasn't really until this very last meeting where a couple of industry members did engage and had really had not heard anything about the framework because the framework doesn't specifically spell out the impact to the lobster fishery itself. So a lot of people didn't understand that connection. And the commission had been asking for the lobster fishery to be reached out to several meetings in the past, and that outreach had not occurred yet. So our board would not be able to hear the results of the outreach until after both councils would take final action under the current time frame. And so that is why we are asking for that delay. One is to give industry time to grapple with this document, which, while I understand is only providing an opportunity or a possibility to use this new type of gear in either all areas or just some areas, depending on the outcome of the document. There's a lot of questions that they have about the next steps and phases, and we're still waiting to hear answers on how those next steps and phases would go through the regulatory process. Would there be opportunities for industry to be engaged during those things, or is it something that would just be done through decisions by the agency in terms of like how different gear types or gears would be approved and what types of requirements would be put on the different industries? So I can take any questions if needed. We also additionally asked to hear back from the councils on how the non-trap gear industries have provided input to the councils and what that input was.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Are there any questions for Tony on this? Obviously, you know, to some extent, if you're looking at the initial version of what we're discussing, the greater implications are not so much for the Mid-Atlantic Council, but you know, I think we need to consider how this affects us. And I think, Bobby, you certainly have been thinking about this. I also, since, you know, it was the regional administrator that presented this to was at Lobster Board and had a discussion there. I would like to allow, if there are no questions for Tony, I would like to allow Mike a chance to comment on, you know, ASMFC's concerns and you know, what is the best way to move forward on this? Because I think the councils are going to have a role. I do think it was very fair. I am on the Lobster Board, just for full disclosure, and that, you know, I supported the motion that there needs to be more discussion. And so, you know, I would like to turn it over to Mike, putting him on the spot on, you know, maybe how we move forward.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Congrats on the position. So, you know, as Tony noted, this action is a bit convoluted in the sense that it's trying to tie together several sort of disparate processes. And so, you know, it was the Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Team and the changes to the Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Plan in 2021 that modified the previously closed no fishing areas that were identified to protect, to reduce the risk of entanglement of large whales from fixed gear, largely the lobster and Jonah crab fishery. You know, so there's a number of areas, as we've presented on the maps, that had been just closed to fishing with fixed gear. And the 2021 rule modified those to allow them to basically for those areas to be closed to persistent buoy lines. With the idea being that if fishermen were to transition to ropeless or on-demand gear, then they would be able to access those areas that had been previously closed to them. So that changed the large whale rules. It did not, however, change the groundfish or, you know, the Magnuson Act based fishery management regs that still require buoys and surface markings in those areas. And so it created a bit of a catch-22 for lobster fishermen who might have wanted to access those areas using on-demand gear, because while the large whale take reduction plan, which put those areas in place, now allowed the gear, the other overarching regs did not. And so we've been working with industry and a number of people, organizations, to issue exempted fishing permits to authorize some fishermen to use the gear in the areas. So anyway, this action was initially, designed as a council action to modify the regulations to make them consistent with the large whale take reduction plan regulations, so that the gear could be used without going through the process of an exempted fishing permit. But as Tony noted, those changes have implications for the lobster fishery, which is not managed by the council. It is managed through the ASMFC Lobster Board. And so it's that's sort of like the third tier of the issues. So the councils initiated this last year, largely driven by the New England Council, which had a couple years, or I think the year prior, put together the on-demand gear working group. And that group that New England started and Mid-Atlantic Council participated in was prompted by the idea that, hey, people are going to start using on-demand gear in our fishing areas. How is the mobile fleet going to be aware of where that gear is? What are some of the complications? What are some of the issues that we need to work through so that we're avoiding gear conflict issues? And so this action was started. We made progress on a couple of alternatives. And then, we started hearing from the lobster industry and the commission that there was some concern about the degree to which the lobster industry was aware or actually even supportive of the concept. And so we had a good discussion at the lobster board in August, as Joe mentioned. And there is this request that is coming from the lobster board for the councils, because again, it's a council action, for the councils to delay taking final action on the framework adjustment until there's more opportunity for consideration and development. We understand sort of what's behind that. While I don't think there's any immediate rush to get this action completed, it is something that we'd like to work through. And as I mentioned at the lobster board, there's a bit of a catch-22 in this action because, as Joe mentioned, and I think maybe Tony might have mentioned, the two alternatives, well, the three main alternatives, obviously there's no action, we don't do this. And then we allow authorized on-demand gear everywhere in the EEZ, which would affect everybody from North Carolina to Maine. Or we authorize it only in the existing gear restricted areas. So I think that some of the issues in terms of potential gear conflict, enforcement, awareness, a lot of those issues and the solutions to those issues will be driven by whether it's going to be limited in time and area to just the gear restricted areas in those particular months, or whether it's going to be allowed everywhere. And so in sort of our initial thought process, we make that decision first. Where and when is this gear going to be authorized? And then we can focus in on mitigating and dealing with the implications of the gear being in those areas. But, basically the conversation at the lobster board was, no, do it the other way around. Figure out all the implications, address all of the concerns, and then we'll make a decision if we support this, whether it's everywhere or in those times and places. So that's what we're working through. We'll be available to answer questions, at the September and October council meetings where this will be on the agenda. And we'll take it from there. If the councils agree to delay taking final action, then we'll work with the councils as we've been doing, and we'll work with the commission to try to resolve some of the questions and the issues that are out there. And if the councils take final action, then we'll work through the process that way as well.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you going in depth on that. And I'll just say that the chair of the council and commission certainly work on finding a way to move this forward. And so again, I appreciate you jumping in as well. So I'll open it back up for questions or comments to either Tony or Mike now. And I saw Sonny's hand.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. New Chair. I think it's important to note also the area, the region that the areas are closed for the right whale closures, the areas themselves that, and if I'm not mistaken, I do not believe that there's closed areas in the Mid-Atlantic. And also the between, as we all know, dealing with the Atlantic states and the mid, sometimes it's hard to get, I guess, participation in a lot of these things. And so I think it would be important to give some time for this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, there are certain species that are certainly, you know, with much appreciation for the week that we just had and the joint meetings. There are those other species that, you know, sitting in only one or the other are difficult to have those conversations. So any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Okay, great. Thanks. So Chris, anything else on your reporter?
Yep, I do have, yep, halfway there, maybe more than halfway. Oh, we do have a hand.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, is it online?
I got it.
It went away. Daniel Salerno.
Oh. So I'm sorry, Dan, I didn't have my screen up, but Dan Salerno, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your new position. I just wanted to point out that from the New England perspective, obviously we got this update at our June council meeting. We are scheduled to take final action in September, as Mr. Petney had pointed out. There were concerns raised at our June meeting about the level of outreach that had gone to the lobster industry. Obviously, we don't manage lobsters, but we do have fixed geared fisheries that this will affect. Just wanted to give a heads up that we will have this scheduled for our groundfish AP meeting as a topic for discussion for any input from our industry participants in the groundfish industry. We are aware of the ASMFC letter that will be coming. I have been hearing some chatter amongst New England council members that there may be some concerns about doing this now versus doing this later. But I guess it's for us in New England, it's kind of a wait and see what comes out of the September meeting. So I just wanted to throw that out there from the New England side. Thank you.
Yeah, very much appreciated, Dan. It's I think it's a little bit more than you than us in some ways, and so I appreciate you jumping in, and I'm very glad that you're listening in as well, and
Yep.
so thank you for that. And so yeah, sorry, Chris, I didn't. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the, excuse me, the next item on the tab is a memo from Jason to me regarding monkfish updates. Remember that we manage monkfish jointly with the New England Council. The council's plan to adopt monkfish specifications for 2026 through 2028 at their, well, we plan to adopt it at our October meeting after the New England Council acts in September, so at their upcoming September meeting. This is earlier than we thought we were going to be doing this, but the New England Council accelerated the timeline for monkfish after the monkfish assessment was replaced with a simple data update instead of a more complex assessment, and because they traded off for other more complex actions that needed to be done later in 2025. If you're interested, there's a number of meetings in Jason's memo that detail what's going on with monkfish over the next several months. Speaking of monkfish, the next item in the memo, or the tab behind the tab, is a memo to me from Kate O'Keefe. Kate is the executive director of the New England Fishery Management Council. She's identifying an opportunity for us to provide input on monkfish essential fish habitat, or EFH. In terms of the background, it's detailed in her letter. Just quickly, the New England Council, like us, is currently working on a framework adjustment to update essential fish habitat designations for 10 of their 28 species. Their framework's being developed through their habitat committee. That framework will include revised EFH maps and text descriptions for all life history stages of those 10 species. Currently, the New England Council's Habitat Plan Development Team is working closely with Mid-Atlantic Council's EFH Fishery Management Action Team to ensure that the EFH designation methods are consistent between the two councils. And the bottom line is that the New England Council is inviting comments on EFH designation alternatives from our council, stakeholders and members during their upcoming Joint Habitat Committee and Advisory Panel meeting that is scheduled for September 11th. Remember that their council is planning on taking final action on their EFH framework at their September 23 through 24th meeting. The next item behind the tab is another letter. It's a letter from us to BOEM, providing our comments on the request for information regarding the 11th National Outer Continental Shelf Oil and Gas Leasing Program. And this letter is something we talked about at our last meeting. It reiterates our comments that we provided to BOEM in 2017 on their 2019 through 2024 leasing program. Just quickly, that letter states that there's insufficient information about how oil and gas exploration and development activities throughout our region would affect fish, invertebrates, marine mammals, benthic communities, and ecosystem structure and function. Given the value of living marine resources and fisheries along the coast, we stated in the letter that additional research is needed to better understand the environmental consequences of those activities. And we end the letter by saying we look forward to working with BOEM to ensure that any future energy development activities minimize impacts on the marine environment. The next item beyond the tab is another letter, a letter from me to Doug Potts supporting the extension of an exempted fishing permit that was issued to Coonamessett Farm Foundation, CFF. This EFP allows for compensation fishing on Atlantic surf clams to fund a habitat mapping project using sonar and a drop camera. The habitat that referenced is in New England. It's the Great South Channel off Nantucket. We touched on this a little bit this week. That was the issue that, if you remember, on the first day that Sean Guillen brought to the council. So it's an ongoing issue. We've talked about it a number of times. It's basically habitat that supports surf clams or surf clams there that the surf clam industry wants to harvest. The habitat there is habitat of particular concern for a number of New England species. So it's a complicated issue. And certainly we welcomed the additional work, research that's being conducted by Coonamessett. When that research is done, we expect it'll be done this year. I'm not sure exactly, I think later in the summer. Those research results will be made available to both councils, and we'll see where it takes us. There is another letter in the document, a longer letter. This also is in response to EFP. This is a Federal Register notice that came out in June 30th, regarding the issuance of an EFP to the Coonamessett Farm Foundation again. As described in the notice, Coonamessett requested an EFP to allow retention of oceanic squid in excess of the 1,700 pound possession limit implemented by the council through the unmanaged forage amendment that we have in place. And Coonamessett planned to conduct exploratory fishing to assess the viability of developing an offshore oceanic squid commercial fishery. So you can see that our response in that letter is a little terse, perhaps direct might be another way to say it. And we point out that, and you can read all the details, but there is a process that this council established several years ago. We spent a lot of time developing that process. There's many stages to that process, all revolving around these species that are in this particular document, this amendment, this unmanaged forage amendment. So we were surprised that we weren't more involved with the decision on the EFP for oceanic squid, which happens to be one of the species that are included in that particular document. So we pointed that out to Garfo. There seems to have been, and maybe still is, a little bit of communication issues related to exactly what we expected and what they expected and what the CFP was about. And we're still not sure exactly how this research is being done because we haven't seen complete documents from Coonamessett yet and haven't reviewed them. So anyway, there's the issue. We hope this is a one-off I've talked to Mike about it. Basically, from their perspective, this was the continuation of an existing permit. We thought it was new research, and as such, should have gone through the process that we detail in this particular letter. And that's all I'll say at this point. So before I open it up for any from questions, that's the main stuff that's in behind the tab. There's a couple supplements to the tab. We've already discussed. There's this letter from Mary, or this memo from Mary on the awards. The other thing that's in there, somewhat longer document, is the May CCC meeting summary. I provide, even though it happened back in May, we didn't have the summary available for the June meeting. We talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to provide it to you so that you can take a look at it and see if there's anything in there that you want to talk about. Finally, the last thing is our 2027 council meeting schedule. I don't know if you actually have the slide. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Thank you. So here is the council meeting. So you haven't seen the list of the locations. You've seen the list of the dates. So there's the dates and the location. So you can see in April of 2027, Philly, and you can just look at and see where we're at for the rest of the year. And I'm providing this to you early because I know some of you like to plan trips many years in advance. And I promise you that we are not changing these dates. I have gone through date changing enough. I've had conversations with the executive directors from New England and the South Atlantic, and we are firm on these dates. And actually, we're firm on these locations too, because we signed contracts. So with that, Mr. Chair, before I turn it over for questions, I just want to do one last thing. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge all the hard work that Mike put into council operations over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
He really, it's, he makes it look easy, but it's not easy. And he had to deal with a lot of stuff over that 10-year period. So I really appreciate everything that he did for the council over 10 years. I appreciate the support that he provided to council staff as well. So thank you very much. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll open it up for any questions.
Yeah, but before that, I thank you, Chris. I mean, I intended to do the same thing, so I'll just do it now, Mike. I mean, it was an era. It really was, and including a pandemic that you got us through. And I mean, I couldn't thank you enough for all you've done for us. So Chris went through a lot there, and I do want to turn it over to Mike Pentney on one particular item, I'm sure.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You just on the two EFPs that Chris mentioned. The first he mentioned was the Surf Clan EFP to Coonamessett Farm. We issued that on July 31st. That was really just allowing them to continue doing compensation fishing for the acoustic habitat mapping project that they've been doing in the habitat managed Great South Channel habitat management area. They basically kind of exhausted the clams in the original area. So we provided them some additional access. They're not getting any additional trips, but just they're able to shift where the compensation fishing would occur in the hopes that we get some good data from their acoustic mapping project. The second, probably more controversial EFP was the oceanic squid. It was not a continuation. It is a new project, but it's an exploratory sort of pilot test. Coonamessett Farm asked for an EFP to do 2 trips to trial jigging for oceanic squid, with the idea that if they have any success at all, then they would come back to us for a more fully developed EFP to further look at that issue to see whether a fishery could potentially be developed. If they do come back to us with a more robust EFP application for more trips, then we would certainly encourage them to work through the Mid-Atlantic Council's forage amendment EFP process. Although we can't hold them to that, but we would certainly encourage them to do so. But this EFP was really it's just for 2 trips to try to get out there and see if they can be at all successful jigging for some of the oceanic squid. That's it.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I think something that Paul said earlier is we can all do better always. I think in the communication sense, we'll continue to work on that. So with that, and I appreciate your comments, Mike, I'll look to council. Are there any questions or comments on what Chris has presented? Yeah, not seeing any yet. Oh, Jim, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. And this actually might be a question both for Chris and Mike, and completely off topic here from what you just went through. But and recognizing the current administration that we have in DC, whatever, this may be almost funny, but because I've heard some talk of this, we're coming up next year on the 50th anniversary of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. And after seeing all pomp and circumstance of everybody celebrating 250 anniversaries, is there just a question, is there, and this is food for thought, is there going to be any kind of recognition or something along those lines? Because a few years ago, the ASMFC hit their 75th anniversary, and what they had put out was a document kind of documenting the history of the commission. And then at their annual meeting, they actually invited back a lot of the previous commissioners or whatever, which was really kind of a neat thing, whatever, and a nice event. So anyway, just again, would that be possible either at a local or even a higher level for, you know, it's a pretty big point, 50 years of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. So thanks.
Thanks for that, Jim. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we touched on this a little bit. So embedded in the CCC meeting summary, there's a section on communications where we talk about what the CCC, so all the councils collectively, are thinking about, because 50 years is a big deal. So next year is the 50th anniversary. So we started out big, and then as things went on, you know, resources became more constrained. And now we're thinking about something a little less than at least what we planned before. So initially, well, we don't have to talk about initially, we could talk about now. So right now, we're talking about a more regionally based focus for a celebration, right? So the celebration, and I'm putting it in air quotes, it is something that we're going to be developing at the council level. In fact, Mary is working with folks, including Hayden, to put together a communications plan that'll detail exactly what we're thinking about. I hope to get that plan to the council in October so that folks can take a look at it and see what they think. We also have you know, a communications committee that Mary could work with to get some ideas. But one of the things that we actually are thinking about at the staff level, and we'll see what you guys think about it, is a refresh of our brand, right? So most companies go through a refresh of their brand like every, you know, 10 years or so, right? So you think about like Coca-Cola and how things have changed, right? So our brand, from my perspective, is getting a little stale. We've had it around for 14, 12 years. So time to think maybe about a new brand. Certainly that could be incorporated into a 50th year anniversary, you know, celebration. But there's other things that we're thinking about as well. So yeah, we're gonna be doing something.
Well, thanks, Jim. That was not something I expected, considering. And I'll just throw out there that Magnuson and I share a birthday, so it's 50 is a big year. It'll be 50 for me too. So. Year of the Dragon, guys. So I mean, I'll look. Are there any other hands or questions on the correspondence part of Chris's report? Not seeing any. Okay. I do want to say quickly that, you know, I think when we talk about how excellent staff is, you know, I appreciate that all the council members have other stuff that they're doing in their lives, but this is almost what's going on behind the scenes. It's obviously not that this is all in front of the public, but, you know, it's when we're not sitting around here that's, you know, that their lives are going on and they're doing all this work. And I just want to say I appreciate so much, you know, when this kind of stuff comes out, some of these letters, you know, I think about the letter to Beaumont Oil and Gas and how important that is. Those comments are, I think, you know, it's a shared sentiment from everyone around here. And so just again, just the comment of thank you to everyone on staff. So thanks, Chris. Yep. And anything else for you, Chris? Oh, that's it for Chris. Okay, great. Thanks. So we'll move on to organizational reports. And so first up is, as always, Garfo. So I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Few updates for you. So on June 25th, we published a proposed rule for 2020 for the remainder of 2025, 2026, and 2027 herring specifications. So some of you might be interested in that. So this action would increase the 2025 herring quotas, as well as set projected specs for 2026 and 2027. I would also maintain the current river herring and shad catch caps for the next few years, and revises the target rebuilding date for herring from 2028 to 2031. These are all consistent with the recommendations of the New England Council. The comment period on the proposed rule closed on July 10th, and the final rule is under review still. Which brings me to my next point, which is that on August 7th, we had to close management area 1A, or reduce the possession limit down to 2,000 pounds, because we had exhausted the old management area 1A sub ACL. And so as soon as we get the new specifications in place, we will be able to reopen that area and lift the possession limit back to the normal possession limit until 92% of the new sub ACL has been caught, and then we'll revert back to the 2,000 pound possession limit. On surf clams, in addition to the EFP that I mentioned, that Chris mentioned for Coonamessett Farm, we also issued an EFP to Atlantic Capes and Rutgers to conduct their surf clam and ocean quahog mixing amendment accounting protocol study. And I think that one's important for this council because council, remember, took an action to do to approve an amendment to modify the mixing protocols and authorize mixed trips for surf clams and ocean quahogs where they're previously been prohibited. So the part of that, sort of the council's final action on that, was with the intention that industry would take the lead to figure out some protocols for how to sort and account for catch of mixed trips. And so we have worked with Coonamessett Farms and Rutgers, and I appreciate their work and a lot of their effort to put together a proposal that we were able to approve in July. So they will be working on that, and I'm sure we'll be able to present the results to the council as we work through refining those protocols to implement the council's proposed amendment. Moving on to a couple of items for tilefish. We published a final rule on June 26th, implementing the 2025 blue line and golden tilefish specs. So those are unchanged from the proposed rule and consistent with council recommendations. And then on July 11th, we published a notice in the Federal Register adjusting the commercial possession limit for blue line tilefish because we had reached 70% of the quota. And so the possession limit was reduced to 300 pounds for the remainder of the fishing year. About 75% of that commercial quota had been caught as of the end of July. Now, Chris already mentioned this. In June, we published the final rule for 2025 black sea bass recreational measures, approving conservation equivalency for the rest of the calendar year. On June 26th, we published a final rule implementing 2025 whiting or small mesh multi-species specifications, again, consistent with the recommendations of the New England Council. And we already talked about the oceanic squid EFP, so I am all set, unless there's any questions.
Great, thank you, Mike. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, being a representative from New Jersey, how important surf clam and ocean quahog is to us, and I'm very happy to hear that work is moving forward. Remind the council that our work on trying to help deal with that mixing situation, we received a round of applause, and that's a pretty darn rare thing, and I think part of that was the workshop that took place, and I very much appreciate that, and look forward to the results from that. Rutgers does a great job, and I'm very excited that they're involved in that. So any questions or comments from Mike? Not seeing any, Mike, so you're, oh, sorry, Jason?
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Cool. I just want to give extra shout out to some of the Garfo staff on Atlantic Mackerel, Chris Winarski and Maria Fenton. A few months ago when they were doing their ACL monitoring for mackerel, it appeared maybe there was an ACL overage, but they kind of really went digging into that, both on some state discard issues and on some kind of odd MRIP data that we ended up actually tracking down some video of some possible folks who the interviews were likely, they caught a lot of fish, but it was so unusual that worked with MRIP staff and did some reweighting. But every mackerel metric ton is precious right now. And if it wasn't for their kind of extra diligence to try to make sure nothing odd was going on, we may have had some ACL overages. So just wanted to note that. Thanks.
No, thank you. Very, very much appreciated that you brought that to our attention, Jason. Any other hands or questions from Mike? Not seeing anything, so I believe we're going to the Science Center. So John, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and congratulations. Looking forward to working with you. Going into our report, jumping right in, Science Center, NOAA Fisheries is still waiting for its full year FY25 allocation. So we do have some uncertainty in terms of the end of this fiscal year and beginning of next fiscal year. And I'll sort of talk about those uncertainties as we come to them. In terms of surveys, we are preparing for a fall bottom trawl survey on Bigelow. All is on track. There is some risk related to our end of year allocation. And then as Hannah mentioned, some risk related to any government shutdown were it to occur. But we are on track from a Science Center perspective. Similarly on track with regards to the bottom long line in the Gulf of Maine, not relevant for the Mid-Atlantic Council, so I'll move on. In terms of scallop, again, not relevant, directly relevant to the Mid-Atlantic Council, but very relevant to many of the states in the Mid-Atlantic. We do 2 scallop surveys. One is a dredge survey on an industry vessel, and the second is a HabCam survey, which we have moved from a research vessel to a NOAA vessel. The scallop dredge survey was completed in July and fully successful. The HabCam survey, we were in the process of working the HabCam survey, had completed about 35% of the track lines. HabCam encountered an uncharted shipwreck in western Georges Bank. It was in Area 1 in the scallop rotational area, which if I'm not mistaken, Sonny, is the same area where the scallops that we had last night came from. So it's a good area for scallops, certainly. After several unsuccessful recovery attempts, we were able to recover HabCam on July 27th, working with a ROV team from University of North Carolina, Wilmington. So, a lot of thanks to that group for getting HabCam back. Sort of initial inspection, the instrument wasn't damaged. It just has a fair amount of growth, and some of the plates where corrosion is supposed to occur will need to be replaced. So hopefully we'll be back in shape for next summer's scallop surveys. The pilot hook and line survey, which is done by our cooperative research branch, has completed the spring 2025 effort. It completed in June, and the team is focused on analyzing data and documenting the methodology to sort of look at whether we would continue or not continue that survey. Short fin squid oceanography, the cooperative research branch has been working in conjunction with the fishing vessel Dryston to better understand the oceanographic drivers for short fin squid. The survey was quite successful, and the squids are undergoing dissection, similar to the effort that Dr. Anna Mercer described relative to longfin squid biological sampling program. We got the Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel update from Hannah earlier. I do want to, thank the team and everyone involved for getting that pilot survey funded and getting the RFP out. That is an important step to getting to sort of a more fully formed regional industry-based trawl survey. There is language in the Senate budget which would fund that regional industry-based trawl survey. And Science Center is looking for other avenues for funding for that as well. In terms of the observer program, the NEFOP Northeast Fishery Observer Program, which is the primary program which works for Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Management Council fisheries. They've completed 100% of their observer coverage. And so they're working hard. We are getting the observer coverage documents out. Those should be available shortly. And we also have been working through making sure the contracts are in place to support that program in the future. Assessment updates. I have some important updates here, so I just want to spend a little bit of time. There's going to be a Northeast Regional Coordinating Council intersessional meeting on August 20th to review the revised assessment schedule for 2026. This revised schedule has been put together by the assessment working group, which has representatives from the Science Center, the regional office, the Mid-Atlantic Council, the New England Council, and Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. So the principals will be reviewing that revised schedule. And then we'll also need to think about, how does our revised schedule then work going forward 2027 into the future. There is an effort at NOAA Fisheries to prioritize assessments nationally. That effort was introduced at the Council Coordinating Committee meeting in May and is still sort of being developed. So we've been working in the Northeast to try to align what we're doing collectively in 2026 and thinking forward for 2027 in the future to make sure to try to align it with this national prioritization effort as it sort of gets further developed. But we'll certainly keep in touch through the NRCC, working together to ensure we're getting our high priority assessments done. With regards to management track assessments, the way management track assessments work are Science Center assessment leads present their assessment plan to the assessment oversight panel. And that has a representative from, again, Mid-Atlantic Council, New England Council, and Atlantic States, and the Science Center and the regional office. That panel then looks at those plans and sort of makes assignments as to the level of peer review that a given assessment plan should receive. In the assessment plan for this September, the AOP, that group, did not come to a consensus recommendation for two of the stocks, Cape Cod and Gulf of Maine yellowtail flounder and Southern New England and Mid-Atlantic yellowtail flounder. So I reviewed their report and looked at sort of where the non-consensus came from and wrote a memo that was added to the report indicating that those two assessments would receive level 2 peer review. And so the plan for 2025 is to go through a number of New England Council stocks. You may remember that we had delayed the Atlantic mackerel assessment, which was planned for that June peer review, to September because we did not have the egg data available. The assessment lead, working with that assessment model, it had been planned to be transitioned from ASAP to WAM. The assessment lead is having some challenges with the WAM model, and the egg data is still not available. So working with council staff and Chris and I, Brandon, Mike Simpkins at the Science Center, sort of think that the best approach would be to go back and use the previously accepted ASAP model and just provide the assessment to the Mid-Atlantic Council as a level 1 direct delivery, and making sure that the egg data is updated in that delivery. So we have our plan, sort of revised plan for that. And if there's any changes, we will reach out to the council if any changes are necessary. In terms of research track, the Atlantic Sea Scallop research track, I presented on that earlier. We also have but there's going to be the peer review for the American lobster research track, September 2nd to 5th, and that's going to be in Woods Hole. And then the longfin squid research track working group continues to meet regularly with a peer review anticipated in spring of 2026. Again, working with the Mid-Atlantic Council and looking at the development of that research track working group. The plan is that the research track peer review will occur in that sort of late February, early March timeframe. In that, the research track working group is developing a sort of more complex, more data intensive method and a less complex, less data intensive method. The intent is to have both of those methods peer reviewed, and assuming that they both pass, they would then be both available for management advice in the future. Then we will hold the management track peer review in June. And the intent is to move forward with the less complex, less data intensive model for that management track, because we don't, we're concerned about the resources being available to support that more complex, more data intensive model. But the full results of that research track peer review will also be available to the SSC when they review the results of the management track peer review. And I think it gives us a good way to move forward on longfin squid, creating options for us in the future, dependent on resource capabilities as we move forward. And then in terms of moving on from assessments, I just want to talk a little bit about the MREP revision. We are expecting revised MREP data at some point in 2026. And then we are, the Science Center, expecting to use those revised data starting with assessments in 2027. We don't quite have an understanding of what our 2027 assessment schedule is yet. We're working on that through that NRCC process, which I described, but it's at 2027 assessments when we intend to bring the new MREP estimates into the stock assessment process. In terms of on-demand developments, we heard about the sort of the conversations regarding the council management actions linking up to ASMFC, the lobster fishermen wanting to know more about what's going on the council side. But on the science side, Northeast Fisheries Science Center continues to work with fishermen on the development of on-demand gear. We're currently collaborating with 48 fixed gear vessels, primarily in the lobster and Jonah crab fisheries, but also in the southern New England fish pot and conch fisheries. We're also working with 20 mobile gear fishing vessels, testing digital gear detection technology. We have a lending library for lending on-demand gear. We have over 700 individual pieces and continue to add to that. To make the gear available to collaborators. And thus far, we've completed more than 15,000 hauls of on-demand gear with approximately a 94% success rate in terms of the gear operating as intended. But all of that gear has been recovered, but 6% of it not using the acoustic retrieval system. So that gear is developing and the methods for using it are developing. In terms of offshore wind updates, we continue to work to develop the Northeast Fisheries Science Center Survey Mitigation Program. Are in conversations with a number of developers in terms of satisfying their language in their construction and operation plans to contribute to that program, and working with BOEM to make sure that it's in alignment with the future development of offshore wind in the region. And then the last update, we've talked about it here a little bit, but we haven't talked about it for a while. There was a proposed study to evaluate marine carbon capture technologies. The Loch Ness project run out of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute was going to conduct an ocean alkalinity enhancement experiment. That project received its permit from EPA in April of 2025 and is getting started this week in Wilkinson Basin. So not in the Mid-Atlantic Council jurisdiction, but in the New England Council jurisdiction. The project has two goals: to evaluate the ability to monitor changes in ocean alkalinity and subsequent carbon dioxide uptake by the ocean resulting from an alkaline solution addition, which is sodium hydroxide, and then two, to collect scientific information to better understand any potential adverse impacts to human health, the marine environment, and other uses of the ocean. So the Northeast Fisheries Science Center continues to track that project and others like it in this region, and will continue to provide updates at future council meetings. So that's it, Mr. Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, John. That was a lot. And,
Yes.
We strive for transparency here. And for those of you not in the room, somehow during John's presentation, that side of the table lost its bunting. And so we can now see the feet of everyone, and including John's clogs on that side of the table. So there's that. And I also want to point out a check mark against me as new chair, that I haven't made it clear that when I'm asking for questions and comments to give the public a chance to also do that. So I will first go to council, and from now on be very clear that I'm also looking to questions and comments from the public. So to the council, any questions or comments for John on that very thorough report? I'm going to start with Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick one. The Loch Ness project. So we have talked about it at the council. There is interest from some of the council members and our stakeholders in that particular project. One thing that I lost track of, there was a larger, is this the larger version of that project, or is this the smaller version of that project?
So my understanding is that they combined the two efforts. The initial smaller version was planned for southern New England. And then the second larger version was planned for Wilkinson Basin. So I think in the permit process, they put both of those together and are conducting, sort of that quote unquote, both projects, the objectives of both projects in Wilkinson Basin.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. And Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for that great report, John. Just a quick question prompted by something that Mike Pentney was raising yesterday with respect to SCUF and I think like appropriateness of OFLs. And just when you were going through the assessment schedule, this popped into my head, but I assume that the only opportunity to really evaluate the appropriateness of existing reference points for some of our managed species is during a research track. But does this come up during the peer review at all, for any of these assessments that, for some of these species, we might need to reconsider those reference points, I think, given some of the things that Mike pointed out yesterday. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the peer review of all of our assessments, reference points are part of that. So in a level 1 direct delivery, there would be no opportunity to review the reference points, but in a level 2, level 3, or research track, the peer review panel could certainly evaluate reference points. I do think, your question is, tied to the projection conversation that we had as well. All of our research tracks, with the exception of longfin squid, are still paused. And I think the assessment working group, once we get set on our 2026 assessment schedule, then that assessment working group will go back and look at, the research track assessments, which are paused, and our future 2027 forward assessment schedule. And certainly, working with the SSC, start to think about, how do we address the projection issue, which is very much related to reference points. So sort of two pathways forward there.
Thank you.
Okay, any others? Wow. Then if no hands in the council, no additional hands, I'll go to the public. I see Greg DiDomenico.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to see my feet like everybody else? Okay,
Yes, thank you.
no problem. Just a quick question to Dr. Hare. Just to confirm, the direct delivery assessment regarding mackerel, will we still have enough time for that to inform our next specifications package? And the way I understand it from your comments, the egg data is coming soon. So will we have that in time to use that for this year or next year?
Yes, my understanding of the plan is that the date of the direct delivery will be, at a minimum 2 weeks prior to the SSC meeting, which will be taking up Atlantic mackerel. Thus, it will be included in the SSC's deliberations regarding Atlantic mackerel. I'm looking over at Dr. Moore, who's giving me the head nod.
Correct.
So that is our intent. And then the egg data, because it's direct delivery, it should be available in time for that process.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, Greg. Any other questions or comments from the public? No, not seeing any. Okay. I think we're staying with the Johns. So we'll go to the Office of General Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a pretty brief update this meeting. You may recall last year we had the rare experience of litigating a NIMS case all the way to the Supreme Court with 2 companion cases from our region, Loper Bright out of the DC Circuit and Relentless out of the First Circuit. These cases both challenged the New England Council industry-funded monitoring program for the herring fishery. But by the time it reached the Supreme Court and the court agreed to hear the cases, the focus was solely on the Chevron doctrine. The Chevron doctrine had directed courts to provide deference to agencies' interpretations of statutes in certain circumstances. And that was the focus of the Supreme Court argument and the Supreme Court decision. And in June of 2024, the Supreme Court overturned Chevron in these cases and remanded them back to the lower courts for further review in light of that decision. The Relentless case, it was interesting when they went back down to the lower courts, they went in sort of different paths. The Relentless case found its way all the way back to the district court, whereas Loper Bright went to the DC Circuit. So it stayed a level above where Relentless went. So Relentless, since our last meeting, we received a decision on the remand, and the district court was tasked with reviewing the industry-funded monitoring, the statutory authorizations for that in a post-Loper Bright world, where the Chevron doctrine has been overruled. And the court has issued a ruling in favor of NIMS, in which the court agreed with NIMS that the Magnuson-Stevens Act authorizes the industry-funded monitoring provisions that were at issue in this case. The parties have until September 15th to file an appeal of that decision. As best I'm aware, that hasn't happened. But until September 15th, there could still be an appeal. And the other case, Loper Bright, that's in the DC Circuit, as I mentioned. The case is fully briefed, but recently the parties filed a motion with the court to hold the case in abeyance while they engage in discussions that might lead to settlement of the case. And the court granted that motion yesterday. So the court will not rule. Basically, that means the court will not issue a ruling until it hears from the parties one way or the other, whether the case is settled or whether the settlement discussions are over. So that is the extent of my update. If I could take a moment and sort of echo what other folks have said regarding former Chair Luisi, I just want to express my appreciation over the years that we've worked together. There have been times where we've hit, some procedural challenges in the operation of a council meeting. Sometimes we've seen them coming, sometimes we haven't. They've kind of come out of left field. And I've always appreciated Mike's real dedication to getting to the right result. And, if that means let's take a few minutes, step back and figure it out, he's doing that. So I've always appreciated that. And thank you for productively working through those issues over the years. That's all I have for my update. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, John. Yeah, and I will strive to do the same. And it's well-deserved compliments, Mike. I'm sorry, I'm just going to keep laying it on. And I will also keep my wisecracking to myself on this agenda item and the next. Those are not areas where I think we should be making jokes. And so with that, any questions or comments from council on the general council report? Not seeing anything from the public? Not seeing anything. Okay, so we will move on. So we'll go to the OLE update.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound good.
All right. No, I'll pile it on a little bit more and echo John's sentiments for the outgoing chairman, and offer congratulations on your nomination, Mr. Chairman. So I'm looking forward to working with you more in your new role. But good morning, council members. A couple of details to share with the council today. Starting with a brief staffing update, I'm pleased to report our new D2 enforcement officer, April Brackett, is now on board covering the Maryland Shore AOR. We're still under a hiring freeze, but enforcement officer Brackett came to us in a lateral transfer from the West Coast region. We're still short-staffed in NED. We have a total of 7 vacancies currently, split between 4 sworn positions and 3 positions between our mission and investigative support groups. Our priorities in Northeast Division continue to be trade enforcement, North Atlantic right whale conservation enforcement, supporting our observer program, NEFOP partners, as well as enforcing Magnuson-Stevens Act regulations. I'll start with a brief update on our trade enforcement work since the June meeting. I don't have any specific trade enforcement metrics to share out today for the current quarter, but related casework continues, including inspections and subsequent investigations conducted by our Michigan-based EO on major ports of entry in his AOR, particularly the Chicago and Detroit ports of entry. Recently concluded trade enforcement cases have ranged in the penalty spectrum from written warnings all the way up to summary settlements in excess of $1,000, and I believe it is new in our written report as well. If folks have a chance to look at that, Mary was kind enough to post it up the other day. Came in kind of late, but there's a section in there that outlines more specific trade enforcement work conducted by the Northeast Division in the second quarter FY25. So just adding on a little bit more to that topic, our sworn staff regularly team up with our agents and officers from partner agencies on container shipment and other trade enforcement related inspections, such as alongside U.S. Customs Border Patrol, Food and Drug Administration, Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as all of our state enforcement partners. And we continue to focus our trade enforcement efforts on all 13 SIMP listed species, seafood import monitoring program that includes shrimp, tuna, abalone, and 10 others. There is one specific trade enforcement case I can highlight today that closed recently involving a Boston and Chicago-based seafood broker who violated their biweekly bluefin tuna reporting requirements, failing to submit reports on, I believe, 303 tuna shipments between July 31st, 2021 and March 31st, 2024. The subject paid over $64,000 in fines for the violation, and web story covering more details of the case is forthcoming, hopefully sometime this month. Folks are interested in learning more about that. Moving on to our enforcement support of North Atlantic right whale conservation, there's been a lot of activity since the last council meeting. Northeast Division sworn staff continue processing speed rule cases to help reduce the incidence of vessel strikes by vessels 65 foot and above. On the Atlantic large whale take reduction plan enforcement side of our right whale conservation efforts, as of last week, our Division 1 enforcement officers completed the third mid-range fixed gear focused patrol of the year. All three of those mid-range or more inshore fixed gear patrols were conducted in different areas within Lobster Management Area 1. On the most recent patrol, officers inspected 325 traps from 9 different vessels. Continuing in reverse order, 2 weeks prior to that, Division 1 enforcement officers conducted the second, and they hauled 12 trawls from 8 unique vessels. And the first was conducted at the end of June, and officers inspected 10 trawls from 9 different vessels on that patrol. And I'll just add, too, that our officers observed low take reduction plan compliance on all 3 inshore patrols. Offshore, we completed our second multi-day offshore patrol of the year in the middle of July, and that took place out of our D2 AOR. So this was the first mid-Atlantic-based multi-day offshore fixed gear patrol since we began conducting those patrols. They're all on a contracted platform patrol vessel. We began those back in 2020. I believe we called them our ROV patrols back then, but they've always been on a platform contract patrol vessel capable of hauling the very large fixed gear trawls that are found in LMA 3, Lobster Management Area 3. So up until that most recent D2 AOR patrol, all of our contracted offshore patrols had been conducted in Lobster Management Area 3 off the coast of New England. Moving on to our enforcement efforts in support of the Observer Program. An observer safety case recently closed with a paid summary settlement after a vessel ran aground with an observer on board in mid-January of last year, so 2024. Our Observer Program liaison special agent also continues to provide new observer training support. He participated in a training event that took place in mid-June, and most recently another that was held last week. Moving on, outside of our trade enforcement, right whale, and NEFOP support and enforcement efforts, if you're interested in seeing a few details on recent vessel monitoring system cases that have concluded, please see General Counsel Enforcement Section's charging information webpage. If you click on 2025 and then June, you'll see 3 cases listed there for the Northeast. I believe they're all VMS cases, and links to the website are on pages 11 and 33 of the written report we provided to the council for this meeting. Quick note on our written report. We've had some discussion internally about the contents we provide to both the Mid-Atlantic and New England Fishery Management Councils. We're interested in streamlining our efforts to compile these reports. Our current plan is to write to the executive directors and chairs for any feedback you're willing to provide on elements of our report you find valuable and would like us to continue to provide, and certainly anything else you would like us to provide that we're not currently. So that's forthcoming. A couple final points of interest today. No updates for the council today on recently closed blue line tilefish cases that I always try to share with the council during these reports. And the final highlight I'll mention today is the conclusion of a successful OLE organized and executed 2-day multi-state highly migratory species operation alongside New Jersey and New York state partners, all with and within the NED or Northeast Division. We wanted to highlight this operation today as it's a great example of the teamwork that exists between OLE and our state partners to ensure a sustainable harvest of domestic seafood to protect American fishermen. Sworn staff conducted this operation on July 25th and 26th in a patrol area that consisted of the majority of navigable coastal inlets from Cape May up to Montauk. 8 NOAA OLE personnel participated in the operation. I believe they were all from NED. In total, officers conducted 87 boardings. 63 were HMS boardings in federal waters, and 24 were state water boardings. They identified 5 HMS violations and 9 state violations during the op. 9 JEA vessels participated in the first day and 8 in the second day, split between New York and New Jersey. And that's all I have to report today, Mr. Chairman. I'm more than happy to take any questions if folks have.
Yeah, thank you, Kel. I appreciate that. So I'll first look to the council. Do we have any questions or comments on the OLE update? And I see Michelle Duval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Caleb, for the awesome report. I just wanted to give a shout out to the table that's included in the report, the enforcement summary data that covers FY 2022 through 2024. I found that really, really helpful. I don't recall if that's been in previous reports. I don't think so, but just wanted to give a shout out for that. Thanks.
I will make a note that we keep that in there. I think that's the first time we've included a table like that, but thanks, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any other hands around the table, and nothing online. So I will look to the public if there's any questions or comments. Okay, great. Not seeing anything. We'll move on to the Coast Guard report.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to start out with that recently at the beginning of July, the Coast Guard has done a couple renaming of our districts. So previously the Mid-Atlantic area was District 5 and a numerical designation, District 1, New England, etc. And now we're a geographical designation. So we are the East District now. If you call it D5, I will not be upset. So this is the East Coast Guard District Enforcement Report from the 1st of June to the end of July. We conducted 44 fisheries boardings with 0 fisheries violations. And then for commercial fishing vessel safety efforts, we completed 61 dockside exams and 41 decals were issued with 1 vessel termination. We had 3 reportable marine casualties. 1 at the beginning of June, Sector North Carolina received notification from the fishing vessel Spray that a 62-year-old passenger had stroke-like symptoms, and they requested a medical evacuation. Coast Guard diverted a helicopter, hoisted the injured passenger, and delivered them to Norfolk General Hospital. Additionally, on the fishing vessel Seabound, the Coast Guard received notification that a 31-year-old on board was unconscious in their rack. The crew member appeared to be suffering from an overdose of alcohol and suspected narcotics. The crew administered Narcan, and the Coast Guard small boat arrived on scene, embarked the crew member, and transported them to Oregon Inlet. And then lastly, Sector Virginia received notification of a 56-year-old on board the fishing vessel Why Not that was presenting symptoms of a heat stroke. Sector launched a Coast Guard small boat and Virginia Beach Fire Department. The small boat received the injured crew member and transported them to EMS on land. And we continue to conduct outreach efforts through dock walks, training, and educational trainings. And the Coast Guard District East units are currently actively conducting unit commercial fishing vessel safety trainings. A very short report this time, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you. And just a reminder of the humanity and all of this and the work that we do. I appreciate that. So any questions or comments from the council on the Coast Guard update? Not seeing any. Any from the public? Nothing. Okay. Well, thank you for the report. And we will move on to the liaison reports, and we will start with New England Council. I'm not sure.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Dan Salerno again. I am filling in for Rick Bellavance, who actually termed out last Friday. So I'm filling in as his role as New England liaison, but also as currently as an acting chair for the New England Council as well. The New England Fishery Management Report can be found on your tab 14. The last time we met was late June in Freeport, Maine, and I kind of want to go over some of the actions that we got, some information we got that you guys have also received. So we received an update on the Executive Order 147276. This is what you've actually received this week as well. A list of recommendations from our council committee, APs, and PDTs will be reviewed by our XCOM and our executive director and be brought back to the New England Council in September for finalization. We also received an update on the Atlantic Scallop Research Track Assessment, just like you'd received this week. Additionally, we received updates that you received in June on the New England Northeast Fisheries Science Center cost survey effort, the offshore wind monitoring standards, and as well as the on-demand fishing gear conflict working group and NOAA fisheries-led gear making marking framework. And as I had mentioned earlier, the New England Council is scheduled to be taking final action on that framework in September. Major actions that the New England Council took in June was we initiated a management flexibility omnibus amendment. This will basically modify certain measures across all our FMPs to increase management flexibility and consistency, and considering the changing regional resources and capacity to support the scientific updates and regulatory process. We expect to take final action in our September meeting. We also had an introduction to the New England Council's holistic strategic planning initiative that was going to be done on under IRA money. We also initiated Framework 40 to our scallop plan, which is basically putting in 2026 specs as well as 2027 default measures. We initiated an accountability measures modification framework in the 2026 and 2027 specs for spiny dogfish. As you know, this is a joint action with you all. And we also included in this the same motions that came out of the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council's, I believe, June meeting. For groundfish, we initiated Framework 72, which is basically 2026 to 2028 specifications for a host of our groundfish species, as well as additional management measures. We also, one of our big issues that we had to deal with was the denial of our Amendment 25 to our groundfish plan. So basically the groundfish for the New England Council had to change its priorities. So we substituted our redfish fishing sector exemption review, the Amendment 23 monitoring review metrics development and revision of our groundfish ABC control rule, with resubmitting a very narrowly defined Amendment 25 as advised by the NOAA's letter received from May 19th. In addition to that, we initiated a new Amendment 25 to the groundfish plan. This will contain the new 4 cod stock definitions as was outlined in the original Amendment 25, but it will also include all the Framework 69 measures related to cod. Final action should be coming in September. And a pretty short report there, so if there's any questions, I'm free to take them.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that, and having you jump in, that was a lot. Are there any questions or comments on the New England Council report? No, not seeing any. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that update. And then we'll go on to the South Atlantic Council update. I don't know if Sunny as liaison, if you have anything, and if there's anyone online, I'll check as well.
Chairman Sinnoh, this is Carolyn Belcher. I'm actually on for the South Atlantic, if you can hear me okay.
We can hear you, and hi.
Congratulations, by the way. Just a quick overview. We had our June council meeting on the 9th through the 13th down at Cape Canaveral. Similar to what y'all have been dealing with, we started out talking about the executive orders. And the council had intended to convene advisory panels to gather further recommendations. We worked off of the current list of things that we have going on. We actually had the advisory panel meeting the other night and got some additional feedback. The council directed the following items be included in the response that's due on September 30th. Again, same as you. We're removing the commercial snapper group or 2-for-1 permit provision. This has been kind of difficult for folks who are trying to get into the fishery, where they end up holding 1 permit but can't seem to find a second one. Removing species from the snapper group or fishery management plan that are not in need of federal management. Currently, our management plan has 55 species, of which a very small section has been through stock assessment. So we're going back through. We actually brought the list down a little bit a couple years back, but we're looking at removing 17 species at this point. Considering actions that we can take that can help address the shark depredation issue. Consider shifting management of spiny lobster to the state of Florida. Exploring the use of exempted fishing permits to manage the red snapper and black sea bass. This is something, obviously, red snapper is a big issue for us right now. There's been a legislative task force that's been formed with a couple of the representatives from the southern states. We're looking to continue to develop an amendment to allow access to a portion of the Oculina habitat area of particular concern for the rock shrimp fishery. This was originally in Amendment 10 to the Coral Amendment, and it was rejected by the Secretary for not being sufficient with protections to Oculina. It's been reformatted. It is now Coral 11 and Shrimp 12. So it's addressing both of those FMPs. And then we're also exploring how the council can support improvements to habitat for managed species in Florida. One area of particular concern that comes up is the Indian River Lagoon. For higher reporting improvement amendment, as we were working through the first day of the meeting, we basically decided to kind of look at these amendments that we have on the block to determine if they're going to help clear the hurdles under the executive orders. So some of these you're going to see that we've just paused work to kind of shovel them to the back of the current schedule so that we can focus on actions that are more deregulatory in nature. So even though it's been paused, it still remains on our work plan and we'll get to it at a later date. We just don't know when. The South Atlantic head boats, in response to public input, we've been gathering information to consider modifying some species vessel limits for head boats. At our June meeting, we narrowed the consideration to 3 species in the snapper grouper, FMU, which is black grouper, gag, and snowy grouper. And we'll continue to work on modifying these limits. Right now, because of the vessel limits, you have a head boat of 60 people, but they're only allowed to keep 1 or 2 fish. So obviously that's causing some issues for a head boat. Mackerel cobia, you all were involved in some of our port meetings that were held last year. So there were 16 in person and 6 virtual port meetings that were held along the Atlantic coast. And had a wide variety of attendees. On March 25, staff reviewed the draft report and provided a high-level analysis of themes from the effort. And the council requested some additional detailed information coming forward from the staff. They presented the information, and we also had an update on Atlantic Spanish mackerel. However, because of things that are going on with MRIP FES, which are obviously no surprise to y'all too, we decided it probably would be best to postpone work on this since it is a very strong recreational fishery issue. We are trying to see if there's potential ways that we could do deregulatory actions in relation to this by looking at some of the responses that we got from the port meetings. As I said earlier, the coral shrimp amendment has gone out again for public comment. We actually had both the virtual meeting last week and the in-person meeting last week in St. Augustine. As would expect, it's still pretty split evenly with concerns between both the habitat group and the fisheries group. We had about 20 people in attendance in St. Augustine. Snapper grouper, continuing to work through with a subcommittee group to look at things that can be done to assist with the commercial fishery. So again, talked about the revision of the 2-for-1 snapper grouper permit policy, looking to revise requirements to acquire or retain snapper grouper commercial permit in terms of unlimited anyway. Establish a framework for dynamic trip limits that vary throughout the season, and establish a non-target or out-of-season allowance for harvest. They also the council wants to also explore the possibility of replacing gear on board restrictions with stowage requirements and looking at multi-day trip limits for a subset of snapper grouper species. Public scoping will be conducted ahead of the next subcommittee meeting, which will be held in conjunction with the council's September 2025 meeting. Innovation plan for snapper grouper fishery provides a potential framework for future discussions towards adapting to changes in NIMS and maximizing commercial and recreational goals. Council intends to engage in further discussion on this topic at upcoming meetings. The unit revision, as we talked about, looking to remove 17 species potentially, whether they're completely removed from the list or being designated as ecosystem component species will be determined. Some state level regulations are currently tied to federal regulations, so the council is reviewing the current mechanisms at the state level so that they have an idea on what the impacts will be, and that's scheduled for the September meeting as well. Black sea bass, I wish our picture was as nice as yours with 284% of your biomass. But we're still having some issues with how to interpret and work with CDR 76. The big thing is the noticeable decline in abundance of black sea bass. And the council doesn't want to wait until the issues with the assessment are resolved to initiate action. Because this is a fishery independent survey that's showing this dramatic decline. It's a little bit harder to argue as to whether or not it's an appropriate measure. We're intending to begin a framework amendment to lower black sea bass catch levels using average landings from 2019 to 2013 for each sector. And they're looking to potentially change size limits, reduction in the recreational bag limit, and a spawning season closure is also being considered. We've also requested that the SSC reevaluate its recommendations relative to the stock assessment and that an additional external peer review of the stock assessment be considered. The private recreational permit and education requirements, that's tied to our amendment 46, which is back to that offshore permit. This has obviously been paused because of the pause with 46. It's still going to be on our work plan, but it'll be reevaluated at a later date. And then the last item was Atlantic blue line tilefish. In spring of 25, the SSC reviewed the blue line tilefish stock assessment, supported the data limited approach based on average catch to establish the ABC for the areas north and south of Hatteras. For the region north of Hatteras, the SSC recommended incorporating updated data from the saddle survey to inform the allocation of the ABC, which, as you all discussed earlier this week, resulted in the 70-30 split. Council was concerned about potential reductions in catch for the South Atlantic region and questioned the apportionment approach. Since a management response is not immediately required for this stock, the council will request discussions with the Mid-Atlantic to explore alternative ways to divide the ABC, noting that developing an approach to address jurisdictional allocations will soon be necessary as species distributions are beginning to change. And with that, I complete my report and happy to answer any questions.
Well, holy smokes. That's a lot. That's a lot. Thank you. I think between your report and Dan's, it's a study in co-misery with what the councils are dealing with. I appreciate that that very informative and intense update from South Atlantic, and yeah, I mean we've got some important discussions to have on Blue Line for sure. So I'll look around the room. Are there any questions or comments on the South Atlantic report? And I see Chris Batsavage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report, Carolyn. Has the council received any feedback from the Southeast Science Center about moving the next Spanish mackerel assessment up on the CDR schedule? And regardless of whether you have or not, is the amendment that I guess I call it a comprehensive amendment that the South Atlantic Council has been planning on doing for Spanish mackerel dependent on that new assessment before work can proceed on that?
So I'm not as familiar with what the discussions have been with the CDR committee, the outside group work, because that's the chair and the vice chair. So Trish could probably give you better insight if they've had communications about that. I know we're limited on stock assessment staff right now. There's only 3 folks in the South Atlantic tied to assessments, so I'm not really sure how that Spanish is working at this point. I do know that the bigger thing is waiting on the FES numbers, which I know obviously a lot of our fisheries needs are tied to that change as well.
Chris, you good? Okay. And thank you, Carol. Again, any other questions or comments? I'll look to the public. Not seeing any? Okay, great, thanks. So with that, we're getting close, hopefully, to getting out of here. But I will ask, the last item on the agenda is any other business or general public comment. So I'll ask if there is any. So I'll stay at the table first. It looks like Bobby, and then Greg, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make everybody at the table aware, which a lot of people are, about the MREP program, the Marine Resource Education Program. And if anybody's interested, not only council members, new and past council members, or anybody in the public, regardless of sector, it's a very informative program. And I sent Hannah the link for the registration. I believe the dates for the next upcoming class is the second week of January in 2026. But I just wanted to kind of flag that for everybody that is available, and it is open to everybody. But I highly recommend, if you're going to participate in any part of this process, that you really consider taking it. Thank you.
Yeah, 1000% agree, and I appreciate that. And I'll stay at the table. So, oh yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bobby, I've talked to that program, some of the staff in that program before with interest, and they've said if for those like us, they'd consider us if they had room, but we're not the primary focus to participate. So could you clarify that? Because what you just said makes it sound like it should be open to us, which I thought it would, but they've kind of made it clear that we would be a second thought for that program. It's not really aimed for us.
Yes and no. Initially, it was because it's still a very capacity limited program. They are looking to expand and possibly have classes in both the New England region and Mid-Atlantic. It's kind of tough to say. I mean, it's designed initially to give somebody that is not from this world insight onto how it operates, how the management process operates, at what point they can be engaged, and how to stay engaged. And then it delves into the science aspect of it at a significantly high level. But I think in the last few years, the last few iterations of it, they realized the value to council members, especially ones that are somewhat new to the process. It gives them a pretty solid leg up. I think it's a way to kind of advance somebody in the process by, you can expedite their experience by a couple of years by understanding the levels. Not so much, it's very informative from a council member standpoint for the council process, but it helps you get a lot better understanding of the scientific aspect of it. At the very least, you get a nice binder with all of the acronyms laid out. So that really helps. But yes, initially, since it's a grant program, and there may be such a, I think of in past, I can talk to Rick Bellavance about it or Sophie Sweets, but initially it was kind of set up so it was primarily for industry, and then they spread it to both commercial and non-commercial, and general public. But you were usually given priority to industry sectors, but that's also because there is a stipend for going. There may, that may not be the option for somebody that's a council member. I mean, they cover your travel to a certain point, and then they do pay your room and board, but you may not get paid from GMRI to attend, or a per diem per se. And I wouldn't think council would pay you either, but if I would just reiterate, if somebody, especially on the council, any council, is interested in doing it, it's well worth what it would cost to go.
Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate that. I'm going to go to Chris and then Scott.
Thank you, Bobby, for bringing MRIP up. Certainly, I would echo everything that you said. I'm a little concerned that Joe's tried to take the program and hasn't been able to. Typically, it is resource limited. They have only a certain number of spaces available. They advertise. They see what kind of folks want to participate. Basically, pull from that. If there's space available, they generally let us know. And for example, I've sent staff, Hayden's been, Shelley's been, other staff members have gone to MRIP, and everybody benefits from it. So the bottom line is, if you want to go to MRIP and you're a current council member and you think you'd really benefit from it, let me know. And certainly I'll put you on the list.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, congratulations. Have to agree completely with Bobby. I've actually attended the MRIP program as well, and it's really invaluable for this process. And to Joe's point, I'll have a little bit more insight on this in a couple of weeks. I'll be attending the steering committee meeting on September the 9th, I think it is. So maybe the October meeting, if anybody has any questions about it, I'll be able to tell you about what happened.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And don't hesitate to remind us at our next council meeting. So with that, I think the next hand I saw was, I'll go to Greg DiDomenico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Greg DiDomenico, Lund's Fisheries. If I could just ask a question to the executive director, if possible. So I'll do just a quick explanation of sort of how we got here and what my intentions are. I am talking about mackerel. Every pound counts at this particular time. A couple of years ago, we were under a very restrictive rebuilding amendment. And at the time, we knew that it was going to greatly reduce catches, and in the hopes of getting some rebuilding back in that stock. That appears to have happened. And it's not just the pelagic guys saying it. There seems to be reports from everywhere, inshore to offshore, that there is a great abundance of Atlantic mackerel. I'm not saying it's the way it was 100 years ago or 50 years ago or 20 years ago. However, we knew that at the time the rebuilding was going to be pretty tough on the fleet, and it really is. So what I'm looking for, Chris, is some assistance and some commitment today, if possible, that during this specifications for Atlantic mackerel, and especially given the news that we heard from Dr. Hare today, if we could prepare for this specifications package, not only to give us advice, catch advice, but also to review the alternatives that were contained in the rebuilding amendment. Basically what I'm looking for is a little bit more of a lenient approach, or quite frankly, a riskier approach to rebuilding the stock, because I think the worst part about everything that we do here is when you are rebuilding and it appears that it's getting more difficult to stay away from these fish, as people say, and we have no real quick mechanism to take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So Greg and I had a brief conversation about this. I had a conversation with staff. Staff's been in contact with staff, being Jason. He's been in contact with Garfo. Stephen, can you put up that motion up if you have it? Did Jason send it to you? Jason, can you put that motion up? Well, they're looking for that. So the short answer is yes, we can. And typically I push back on any additional work that is thought about for staff. Certainly we only have 4 months left in the year. But this year we've been talking quite a bit about mackerel, which suggests that maybe there's more mackerel around, which is a good thing. So I can, with staff resources, support what Greg is asking us to do. The motion would basically, we have to, as a council, agree that we will modify what we're planning to do with mackerel using a framework. So I'm not the mackerel guy, but certainly what Greg is asking for is instead of, for folks that are, that you know that there's a 60 percentile association with risk, I guess, and we want to move it down to, we want to look at 50% as well, and at least have that available for the council to look at and the SSC to look at when they have their deliberations this fall. The idea is, as John indicated, is that we wrap everything up by December to get those specification packages in. So as long as, since we can't find the motion, I don't think we need a motion. Oh, wait, there it is. There's the motion. There it is. So this is, it's pretty straightforward. And obviously I can't make a motion, but you guys can.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Joe, if you want to make that motion, certainly.
Mr. Chair, good.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I move to initiate a framework for upcoming Atlantic mackerel specifications that would continue Atlantic mackerel rebuilding, but consider another rebuilding path that achieves close to and at least a 50% probability of rebuilding by 2032, which would be an additional option to the current 61% probability of the rebuilding path.
Sonny.
Thank you, Mr. Chris. We have a motion on the, nope. We have a motion on the board. Looks like a second by Sonny Gwynn. Thank you, Sonny. Discussion on the motion from council. Dr. Hare.
I recognize I'm not on the council, Mr. Chair, so thank you for letting me make a comment. I do want to say that the Northeast Fisheries Science Center has been working with members of the Atlantic mackerel industry to develop a cooperative research plan to improve the science to support our Atlantic mackerel assessments in the future. It's not going to be relevant in the time frame of this framework action, but I think it is relevant for the council to know that there is a lot of interest on the behalf of the Atlantic mackerel industry to improve the science to support the fishery. So I just wanted to make that known to the council. Thank you.
Twice. No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, you know, these are the types of species and times where we need to be reactive. And, you know, we have, when people ask me what I do, I say I'm a bureaucrat, and that usually means we move very slowly. And sometimes that's not the most helpful for what we're trying to do. Any other discussion from the council on this? Sonny? Yeah, and to that, I apologize for not allowing the motion folks to have a chance to speak. Yeah, so Joe, do you have any other?
No, I think it's been well covered, what was presented both in Greg's comment and in Chris's comment. I think we've covered it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. But one of the things I'd like to comment on is the comment that Greg Domenico made is what the people are seeing on the water. And I think that's very important, and we shouldn't take it with a grain of salt. Thank you.
Okay, so any other comments around the table? If not, I'll look to the public. Oh.
This is Jason. Since I'm sharing, I can't raise my hand, but I just want to just flag for expectations. The results of the assessment are likely to have more of an impact than this. At least at the time of the last assessment, you know, there was an impact from the different rebuilding paths, but the assessment results themselves will be the primary driver. This would result in an option with a bit more fish, but it's really the results of the assessment that are going to kind of set the overall restrictions. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. That's important information as well. So I'll look to the public and especially to Greg. You know, does this? Yeah, anyway, Greg, comments?
Yeah, this is more than we've bargained for. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Not seeing any other hands from the public. Back to the table, we have the motion. Is there any objection to this motion? Very good. Not seeing any, so we'll consider this motion approved by unanimous consent. And then We are on our last agenda item, so is there any other business to come before the council? Not seeing any? Okay, well, great. Thank you, everyone, and again, thank you for the opportunity to help be involved in leading this this important work. I very much appreciate it, and safe travels to everyone. We are adjourned.